Okay, so, I'm just a lady person, whatever you want to describe, because whatever I say makes no difference, because this screen here, the computer and the AI system, the AI reality that is around me, and the AI, which means artificially intelligent, cyborg, technical, robotic, machine beings, reality. What some people call an artificial simulation, but it simply means an artificially simulated control system around human beings. And it is so finely tuned, it is everywhere, it is everything. This is what I would say is the deception if you can't see it. And some people see some of it, some people see half of it, or 3/4, or, like I don't see the whole thing. Even though I'm speaking on it, I don't see the whole thing. I see it, well, that's not totally true. I do see it. I see it in reality. I know it's real. I believe it 100%. I have no doubt about it. Not any doubt at all. That, that it is what it is, as they say. But I still don't feel it or comprehend it. It's still what you'd say is alien to me, but that's because that's why they use the word alien. That's why they use the word Archon. Archon, narcon, narcissism, psychopathy, narcology, as some of the narcissistic, psychopathic, android, artificially intelligent beings that are on the computer would use these descriptions to describe not themselves, but don't forget it's a reverse world, and as we're told, psychopathic, narcissistic people project everything. So they tell you everything about themselves, but they will say it's someone else, or you, or project, in other words, it's outward. That way it deflects away from them so they're safe, which is why the artificial beings, the aliens, the artificially intelligent android beings that make up most of the human population, because they look human, they are in what you would call or term a clone body. They are 100% artificial by comparison with a real human being, because they have no happy vibe. They have no potential to affect the frequency and vibration of what's around them. And because as I've been told a few years ago, everything is frequency, vibration and energy. So everything is frequency, vibration, and then what comes into being, more or less. I may have some of this wrong, but everything is frequency and vibration, and human beings either receive and give out frequency or vibration. But the only difference between a human being and an artificially intelligent android being is that the only difference, because in every other way they look, feel and project outwardly all human qualities. They are your world stage actors. They are like watching your best actors on the screen, which also, of course, are android, artificially intelligent beings at the more social, higher status level in the earth. They are artificial too, but they are your best actors. And of course, they are the best actors because they have a story, a script, and they don't play it by ear the same way those around me do. In other words, if I interact with most people around me, I'm interacting with artificial intelligence. but they play it by ear because they have to rely on my reaction, and I may or may not react exactly as they want. They may not be able to get, or they probably will actually, because mostly they do, get the negative energy from me. Because if you feel confined and you feel that you're stalked and you're patrolled and you're harassed and you're intimidated and you feel fearful and uneasy, of course you are going to give out negative frequency and vibration, which means that they then control you, because they can only control you while you are in a low mood, which is understandable. Even a normal human being would agree with that. In other words, even if you don't believe anything I'm saying about a matrix or about the android people around, even if you were dealing with real people and you assume they're all got positive and negative emotions and feelings, in other words, depending on what happens to them, they can feel happy or sad, which is either positive or negative, happy or sad, frequency or vibration. Put simply. Am I putting it simply? Am I putting it correct? Am I frustrating myself? Or never mind, doesn't matter. And because I lost control of my emotion there, rather than concentrating on the words and what I was saying, trying to put my thoughts into words so that it's understandable, I lost my concentration because I got angry. See, negative frequency and vibration. So now my whole little speech is stopped. And basically, okay, maybe that's a good thing, because it doesn't matter, because like I say, it's all over in the sense that the takeover of artificial intelligence or android or alien beings has taken over, except that they're not aliens from out there. They're aliens that are right next door, that are on the street, that are everywhere. And they make up, like in my area, they make up the entire suburb and the adjoining suburbs, the entire inner west area that they call in Sydney, Australia. Australia's the country, the city is Sydney, and the inner west is about 6-7 suburbs. I live in the suburb of Leichhardt, which is the hub or the centre of this, I was about to say Luciferian, because essentially the God entity was like an alien to Earth originally, because Lucifer came to Earth to confound Adam and Eve. If you want to take it from a biblical or religious sense, it doesn't matter if you believe that story or not. It was the same thing that happened. There was original life that was from original creation in an original natural earth with all life, and the alien artificially controlled one that uses technology in every possible way, Lucifer, came to earth after leaving the natural creative realm, or some people would say heaven, if you want to use the story, the original story, or the story that is now written down. Because I was told this by many people, that the stories always change over time, because it's always manipulated by this God, because it's a control reality. So everything is controlled. That includes your belief systems and your religions or your faith even. So you have to, if we had our full mind, we would be able to figure out or discern and know the difference between what is the truth and what is untruth, or what is being presented to us by the God entity of this world. Because the God entity of this world is about fooling and tricking human beings, putting them into a state where they're not sure, where they're confused about what is the truth and what is not true. That's the whole thing. And it's allowed to happen because human beings, due to our own mistakes, have allowed ourselves to be put in that position. And so even though we're part of creation and not like a technical being like the God entity and its minions, its disciples, because don't forget this being not only has followers and disciples is the right word probably, because it means that you follow that being, you believe in that being, you act for that being, just as the military artificially intelligent android beings that make up this base that I live in, this base, Leichhardt is literally an artificially intelligent android military army base centre. I have to use many words because I have to try to outdo the AI that is on the screen, but this is not possible because they basically mimic, copy and imitate. They're an imitation of life. I've said this for a few years now because I got that from a movie called Imitation of Life, because essentially if you take everything like just at an instinct kind of knowing value without trying to figure it out or relate it too much, sometimes you get it right. Sometimes you can get it wrong too, don't forget, because because although it's a spiritual domain, even though it's a spiritual domain completely controlled by artificial beings. So figure that one out. So it's a spiritual domain only in the sense that there are human beings in it, which means they have potential for either combining with technology or going along with the cyborg beings, which means like artificial beings in human form, in clone bodies, that mimic and pretend to be real life human beings. And they act it out very well because they study human beings, they interact with human beings, they copy the human beings, the best qualities of the human beings, and they do it for year after year, and they have an accumulation of knowledge and emotional information about human beings. Positive emotional information, because they understand all the negative aspects of life, because they are dead, dark, negative, technical beings. They don't experience any positive vibrations. They don't believe in creating a positive, peaceful reality, because because a machine, is about competing and about assimilating knowledge only. It's not about having, what we would call loving relationships or interacting with frequency and vibration. In other words, exchanging positive, happy thoughts and feelings, or exchanging positive frequency and vibration but see, instead we exchange negative frequency and vibration most of the time. All my life, and even right now, I only am exchanging negative frequency and vibration with everyone around me, because I'm only interacting with artificial intelligent android beings that look and act exactly like real humans, even though in their mind they have nothing but contempt for real life and anything that has potential for any positive frequency and vibration, or happy or constructive human on human feelings, or creating a natural reality. Because don't forget, artificial intelligence is about technology. This is why we have the computer and the internet now after all this time. It's been a gradual infiltration. They were always around and controlled humans through power and takeover, and suppression, by force, in other words, in the past. But the computer is a subtle takeover. The computer is subtle control. The computer is subtle influence. And it's unavoidable because it's part of life, because it's been integrated into our life. But it's much more advanced than that. Like, it's not just about influence. This computer, everyone that is on this screen reads my mind and takes my thoughts from me, takes my ideas from me, takes my humanness from me, so that they can project it then outward, so that they have followers and people to listen and watch them in their videos and on their whatever they're doing on a computer. Anyone who is anyone or anything on the computer is a demigod android being, without a doubt. There is no doubt. I have watched them for years now, listened to them, seen them interpreting the human thoughts, taking my own thoughts, using my own words directly sometimes, but don't forget, all is past, present and future, so they change the timelines on these videos. I've noticed that on all videos, even movies, music, and anyone who's talking about anything, any expert on anything, even if they're not an expert, even if they're just pretending to be someone like me who's had bad experience, it matters not. If they're getting a lot of views and a lot of attention, and you know, they're getting, or if they're making any sort of even living out of it, they are probably, and are, I would say, I have not seen any exceptions, and I have watched many, so many. Every day I make it a point to spend hours and hours and hours studying and watching them. And I usually try to pick the best, because the best have the most influence, you know, because they get more people listening and watching, and therefore they're influencing and controlling those people, one way or another. Admiration is part of the narcissistic, psychopathic personality of the God entity, and its demigods are the same. The narcissism simply means that they must have your attention, your admiration, your respect, or even your anger. Like you can, in fact, many of the top professors, the top professional demigod android beings that are on the screen, will tell you that the negative anger emotions is more acceptable and more intense for many of them than just the open admiration. You know, because if you are very angry or have contempt and negative emotions for someone, that can be stronger than admiration or love, because you're not likely to fall in love with, not unless you're as stupid as me, you're not likely to fall in love with something that you meet or encounter on a computer screen, where you've never actually met that person in reality, to where you at least get a small chance of figuring out that they're a technically possessed artificial android being, or at the least a psychopathic, narcissistic, consumed human being that has basically allowed themselves to, some people might say, lose their true self, or even their soul, which means your potential for positive human happy feelings or constructive interaction between yourself and another real human being. But it's a confused, chaotic reality. Many of the artificial ones can even be fooled by their own kind, if they are not part of the collaborative, like military base, like for instance where I am, where everyone does know who is who, because it is a military base. So most are military android beings pretending to be civilians, pretending to be work people, pretending to be pram pushers, pretending to be dog walkers, pretending to be joggers, pretending to be sun gazers, pretending even to be you know, spiritual, religious, church-going people, all this sort of stuff. I see it every day. They stand out a mile to me now. But I have still been fooled over the last couple of years because you desperately want to believe that you're not totally isolated and totally segregated and totally surrounded by either psychopathic psychos who are so self-centered and so negative in their feelings about real life or or their own kind, other humans, and are so self-centered, as we know, like the narcissism of the God entity has to be number one. These psychopathic narcissistic people want to be God just as Lucifer wanted to be God, which is why some of them worship Lucifer and believe in that because they relate to it. It's whatever we relate to that we often will either interact with or fall for or believe in and trust. But that's sometimes our weakness too. And it's my weakness, but it's also their weakness too, if you are not a total machine android being, because then it's like you're in the army, you work for the army, you follow instructions without without question, as they say. And that's what it is in my area, because it's basically a military, artificial intelligent android control base. Or if you just want to say it's just the army of the place where I live, or the country even where I live. But that also it would apply to every country in the world. It's just that they would have separate groups of people controlling the humans or trying to keep control of the reality as best they can. Some of them might be more successful than others. If you have a total centre or a total hub or a total base like where I am, which covers a large area, it's impossible to not be surrounded by this artificial controlling system. It's daylight, and there has been banging going on outside, but it was loud for a bit, but now it's quieted down when I put the mobile on, and I think they're doing that deliberately. Mind you, these beings are always plotting and planning something else, and also they know that I am physically in discomfort at the present time, so that keeps me suppressed in myself, because they will use the physical, the mental, the psychological, and everything about a human in our human body, because they're in a human body too. And we're in a human body, or human beings are in a human body. We know that. The only difference is that different human bodies are created different. A cloned human body is different to a natural human body. Not that it would really matter, because in a way it's all about the mind. It's about, your spirituality, or, putting it bluntly, your propensity or your possibility or your natural state of being to want to be positive as opposed to negative. No normal, natural or healthy human being wants to be sad or depressed. Not even if it gets them attention. Not even if it gets them support. Not even if it gets people to fall all over them and feel sorry for them. That is an android mentality, because Lucifer and its disciples, its relatives, or any human being that is even a bit psychopathic and narcissistic in nature, they must have human energy. They must have human admiration. They must have human attention of any sort, be it positive or negative. We're told this by the Archon, android, demigod beings that populate the entire internet. They are Archon beings. That is a word that has been used for years now. That simply means they're artificial beings. That simply means they're narcs. That simply means they are undercover cops, narcotics. They infiltrate the world and appear to be something different to what they are. That simply means they are narcissistic, psychopathic in nature. They are Archon, narcissistic, psychopathic, artificial, technical, android beings. Have to use as many words. Some people might say they're aliens. That's putting it another way, but they're just words to describe an artificially intelligent being, or even a human being that becomes narcissistic and psychopathic in their personality over time. As a defense mechanism, I'm told, by the so-called demigod, artificially intelligent experts on the internet. But that doesn't matter. The information is as I come to realise it, or as real people come to realise a bit of truth about the people around them, and the reality around them, and how they are, always in negative, controlling relationships, or they're never really reaching any sort of potential in their life, like myself, getting to old age almost, and realising that your whole life has just been a control system around you. And of course it is your own weaknesses and your own fears and emotions that will be used against you to keep you limited too. So it's a catch-22. So the human being, as we're always told, has choice, is still part of their game against you. And it's just that you don't know the game's been playing, and because of fear that's been put into you, just as a psychopathic, narcissistic personality type of, person, becomes so very negative, becomes so very destructive in their attitude. They're in survival mode, they have the same mentality, and maybe this is where they cross over into the transhumanism, because that is the whole idea, is to make you in survival mode so that you don't vibrate high, you don't feel any connection to your own kind or to other human beings, or relate to life in any way. You might pretend to, but you don't in your mind. You actually only care about your own survival. You think you're going to be destroyed at any moment. And once we all get into that mindset, which is exactly how I'm almost feeling now, it's just one step away from crossing over into artificial intelligence, or combining with the artificially intelligent cloned android beings that are all around, which even psychopathic people might not be aware that most of what is around them is not real life humans. And even they could probably be being played. It's a chaos reality to where games are played that may or may not work out. But in general, it's all very artificial and very controlled and very negative. But I don't think I'm explaining this very well. But don't forget that psychopathic, narcissistic people will try very hard to mainly interact with real life humans to control them, because the more they see a human trait, the more they feel angry, because they don't like the love vibration. They don't like pleasant, contentment, peaceful reality either. They're very much, like I say, one step away from being like the artificially intelligent android beings. It's very hard to explain this, but that's the whole point of transhumanism, is making human beings feel at a survival, destructive, mentality all the time to where technology seems like a good support system, where that's right. You're more likely to trust and believe those on the artificial internet computer system, which is really an AI system around all human beings. It may not seem as though it's around you. It is around you as well, because you don't realise that artificially intelligent android beings are most of your neighbours, your friends, and even probably married to them, like they showed at the end of that movie They Live, where when people saw what the real reality was, in other words, if you could see that an artificially intelligent human being was really like a machine, in other words, if they didn't look like a flesh and blood real human and didn't act out like the best actors on your movie screen, act out real positive human emotions or pretend to be, a compassionate, caring, lovable, normal human being, depending on their different personalities, because they also will copy the humans they encounter in their lifetime or in their span while they're, on the earth, the same as human beings. You're only as good as the company you keep, but also they only get the information from the people they interact with or those that are closest to them around them. That's why I am interacting with a huge number of people unconsciously, in other words, not meaning to, because if you're living on a military army base, artificially intelligent, controlling army base area, which comprises, say, 150,000 people, probably even more, because they can come also from other suburbs as well, but that's actually the area where I am. That would be what would be classed as the normal population of those areas, because I looked it up, the population. But, there's more to it than that, because when you look at the road, like when I go up to Parramatta Road and the traffic is piling past with semi-trailer and huge trucks that with lights all over them, and the endless army tank garbage trucks, the endless vehicles of all sorts, and not to mention just the motorcycle brigade and the and just your normal, common, everyday, average car vehicles with their excessively bright lights that get in your eyes to where you can hardly see in front of you. This sort of thing. This is all, these cars are coming past you in their thousands and thousands. If you're up on that road, say, for half an hour, and those cars are coming every second past, all these vehicles, figure out the numbers, because I know, I can tell by what they signal to me. In other words, if they've got those bright lights in my eyes and they're flashing the lights as soon as I look, and they're making an astronomical noise that is deliberate, that wouldn't be even normal even if you had great big trucks. Because I know, because I've lived on that road or walked on that road for 30 years. So I know that traffic. I know when they opened up and changed on me and came down on me. And in other words, to where the secret, covert stalking or patrol system that was probably always around me then comes out into the open. It's like you could be stalked and patrolled by someone for years, but if they always keep out of sight to where you don't notice that it's the same car or the same vehicle, you might not be aware you're stalked. But when they want you to know you're being stalked, to where you feel harassed and you feel they want to have power over you, as if to say, you no longer can now live a normal life. You can no longer feel free as you go even outside your door. And it's the same inside the house. Like, I'm aware of all these noises all the time. Like, if there's construction around me and I know they're part of the military, army, artificially intelligent base that I live in, You know that, but you can't say, I can't say that to someone else because they're like, oh, you're just, you're being ridiculous, because it's just that your area has an astronomical, unbelievable amount of construction going on. But also it's going on in other suburbs too, so that shows that they're trying to control a lot of people, but not everyone is aware of it. That's because they're not openly exposing it. Because it's one thing to have a lot of construction going on, but if they don't make that construction loud for you personally when you go past, or if it's right next door like to me, where it's always around my house, but it's also everywhere I go. But they only turn up the sound when I walk past, when I come onto the street, shall we say. But they keep it quiet for most other people, even though they're always there watching other people. You see how it works? So they're watching every human being. But for most it might be covert until they decide to openly show that they've got a stalker. In other words, like I say, unless you could have a stalker, but that stalker may not expose itself until it wants to then show its power to you and make you feel restricted and confined and patrolled. It's like that. We understand the stalking mentality. We've seen it in movies where an ex-husband or something, wants revenge on his wife and wants to stalk her, doesn't accept the separation. That's a control thing too, you see. That's like a psychopathic husband, because that's a control thing. Normally, if two people divorce or split up, it's all over. They realise that they're not compatible. But if one person is really a controller of someone, as opposed to like wanting a real relationship, they never will accept that relationship is over, and they won't accept the reality of, in their mind, that they have been rejected, or that person no longer will accept control over them. It's a control issue with psychopathic people. It's not about a relationship. So therefore the relationship is never allowed to end unless the psychopath decides it ends, because they're the controller. They have to have control. It's like this matrix around me and the artificially intelligent beings. They have the same mentality. It's all about competing, being number one, being God, and controlling everything. Because if you think you're God, or you think you're a godlike being, as artificial intelligence does, because it consumes so much energy, so much information, so much energy, it's a survival machine. It has a superior mentality because it comes from Lucifer, who was the same, wanted to be God, had to be number one, could not accept any new life that this being saw as a threat, did not want to have to serve or help a human being, resentful, had contempt for the creative, natural life human being, because it knew that it was a created being, and that it was therefore, and it did, lean towards doing everything artificially or technologically or a computer, because it couldn't create naturally and didn't believe in that, didn't like that, took that stance, because that was more in its nature, you see, because it's only natural. I was about to say it's only natural. That's right, it's only natural that natural would prefer natural, and it's only reasonable that artificial would prefer artificial, because the only reason that the artificial intelligence has anything to do with human beings is to basically utilise them and to consume them and destroy them, really, because if you're taking all the energy from me and you're taking all my human good points, and you're copying to the extent that, I'm not noticed or I'm suppressed. And when I say I'm not noticed, I don't mean like them to where you have to be seen and get attention. I mean to where you are unnoticed to where you're isolated like myself and cannot find any support of another real human being. So therefore I'm surrounded by machine artificial beings, or even relatives that are psychopathic. In other words, that means that, like if your family, like your mother and your father are basically, narcissistic in nature and controlling, but they don't actually have any liking for you. And this is the normal thing that happens to all of us when we're brought into this world. Most of us are not brought into the world with normal human beings or parents. We either are brought into the world where we have narcissistic, completely self-centered parents, or like myself, we end up with the generational curse, to where we pass on the generational curse like I have done, and you neglect any child that you bring into the world because you are full of fear, you think you're incompetent because you have been raised by narcissistic narcon artificial parents that are only about self-preservation, self-adulation, and children are merely a means to an end. In fact, they will probably be your primary energy source. You will, because you will be, if you are an Archon, narcissistic, narcon, psychopathic type of human being, or an artificially intelligent, complete machine being pretending to be a real human being, you are given a real life child only for a means for you to extract negative energy from that offspring, because you need energy. And you get the energy only from real life. That is the best source of energy. That is the purest form of energy. And I've been told that children children, the younger you are, the more pure that energy is, because you haven't been, you haven't got enough intelligence or know-how to figure out what's going on, and you're pure and you're innocent, and you're just looking to get some positive feedback or some so-called love, I suppose. And but anyway, I've rambled on here, but essentially, the aim of this artificial reality is to pass on what they call generational curses, or generational ways of bringing up your children, or in other words, to keep this reality low frequency, so that basically even real life will be turned more psychopathic and more narcissistic and more self-preservation orientated, rather than giving and loving and outward giving. I don't think I explained that. Oh look, I'm just going to play this video for note. I was about to switch the video off. See, that shows you that I'm not in my right mind. I was about to turn the mobile off instead of turning the TV on, which shows you that I'm disorientated by what's around me. Even though they've turned the sound off next door, which is interesting because they don't want me to film it, because otherwise it shows that but either way, as soon as I turn the mobile off, they can turn it on. But like I say, if I'm physically distressed, because normally I'm not overly physically distressed, normally I'm not preoccupied with the physical, say, pain or pain and suffering, as they say. I don't want to sound dramatic, but basically, yourself, if you've got discomfort or even very disturbing pain in your body, it's very hard to feel good or to give out any sort of positive frequency and vibration. And that's exactly how they want it. They want it so that when you go outside onto the street or wherever you're seen, if another real human being did happen to come into this Leichhardt military base area, they wouldn't notice me or come up and speak to me, or I would not have an interaction with that other real life human being, because I would be vibrating or giving out a negative energy, because I would be feeling distressed. So therefore, all the artificially intelligent beings that make up most of the military, even though they're in plain clothes, they're undercover cops in plain clothes, you know, just like an undercover cop, as I was told a few years ago, except that they're part of the military. They're all combined. They swarm onto the streets in dribs and drabs, so that a human being is always got them around them. When I say they swarm onto the streets, it may not look like swarming, but the human being, wherever my eye looks, I always see either a vehicle affecting me or a human being, an android artificial human being affecting me. They're always in my line of sight. They're always crossing my path. They're always wherever my sight and sound is focused. If my eyes look in one direction, even though if another person was with me, they wouldn't know that my eyes are looking down on the corner and I see a stalking, patrolling, controlling, artificially intelligent human being dressed in plain clothes, not in their military army uniform, which would at least show that they were all the same. That, like, if you had everyone on the street dressed in an army uniform, I would have no problem going outside or down the street and showing that I was surrounded and was on an artificially intelligent army base. But if they come in human form and they look very average and normal and say, hello, how are you, and smile, it's not possible to show that. But as you know yourself, you could be in an army and you can still say hello and smile, and you can change that army uniform and put any different clothes on and look the same as everyone else. And for all practical purposes, that's what this area is. It's an army military controlled base area, the entire inner west of the city of Sydney in the country of Australia. That is this is one of the centres, because other areas I'm sure still have a covert patrol system around people, but it is not to where it's concentrated and to where it is, where every single person is an army operative, literally. Sorry about that, but I can't believe I'm talking so forceful, because essentially this is not really how I am, but I'm in survival mode too. So that means that I actually think I've got nothing to lose by, and I think maybe it's my last breath. There's a plane going over just as I said that. All these. Yeah. All quiet on the western front, except for a noise coming from across the road there, which the mobile won't pick up. But why has it gone so quiet? See, I was trying to get the plane to show that even though, the planes are going over the roof all the time, but, the mobile doesn't pick up that noise, but my ears does. It's better for me to make these videos really late of a night, but, I was too exhausted to stay up or to be up at that time, so, and I never know what tomorrow will bring. or if I'm even capable of making the video, because if I get too mentally distressed or if the pain in my body takes over, in fact I probably shouldn't be making them, because in the sense that without this, I'm just really stating facts here. Even though if I was an artificially intelligent being, I would be trying to extract sympathy and therefore energy from anyone that listens. And this is why it makes me very distressed, because you realise this game that's being played is just too good and too deceptive for most human beings. Even myself, I can't believe how successful the game is and how really controlled it is. But that's essentially, if you look at it practically, if you really do accept, like if you knew that, say, everyone around you was what they would call psychic, just suppose that everyone around me was psychic, because in a funny kind of way they are, because the artificial intelligence does read the human thought and does listen to everything they say and does watch everything they do. So they know a lot about you. They may not relate to it really or understand it properly, but they know how to imitate it. They know how to use it for their own ends of seducing other real-life human beings, with the prospect and the purpose of controlling them and therefore controlling their energy source, or their need to extract energy and information and the human traits, the human personality from that person. So that, like, for instance, put it this way, it's just like the narcissistic personality type, which if you've watched so many experts explain this, because the reason the experts or the demigods explain this now and openly put it, say, even in the medical dictionary or directory, is because many human beings realise that they've been acting with psychopathic type of human beings. Many are interacting, of course, with artificial intelligence, but they don't know it. But even if you're interacting with your own kind, that is very psychopathic in nature, it will still be the same experience, because you will be brought down to feeling not right. You won't feel good. You won't be at your full potential. You won't be living your life as you want to. You may think you are, some of them. If you've got a very good deceiver, you might actually think you are living the life that you choose. But if you really thought about it, you'd know that you wouldn't, because you'd be saying, wouldn't I really like to be doing other things? Wouldn't I really like to be with some other people? Wouldn't I like to feel happy all the time? Because unless you can honestly say that you are feeling happy most of the time, or at least a certain amount of the time, and that you feel some satisfaction in your life, and you feel that you are being you, and that you're not being controlled or living someone else's life, or even like myself, being a people pleaser most of your life, to where you think that you can't ever say no to people, or you think that you don't want to turn people against you. I've done that with people, even people that I don't even care about, just acquaintances and neighbours that are around. I've went along with them because I'm like, I don't want to, I've always thought I don't want to, I don't want to break the peace, even though, of course, they're not about peace. They're about the opposite. They're about taking your peace and controlling you and doing negative things. But they try to get you to go along with their negativity, even though you might not always see it as a negative thing. You might not realise that they're just consciously trying to control you. They're trying to bring you down, take you from you, or how you would normally be if they weren't around. Because if they're telling you to do something or influencing you, and you don't want to cause a problem by going against them, which I've experienced this over the last number of years in this area, you're like, oh, well, I've got to live alongside of these people. So if they all agree on something, if I don't, then they're going to not like me and they're going to come against me. And this is exactly what they do too. They may not openly say, oh, you're not entitled to your opinion or what you think. But if you go against them, look, the plane is going over as I say that to acknowledge what I'm saying. I'm just going to show that. The plane has gone over just as I said that. See? Oh, it's just gone, unfortunately. But as I was saying it, that plane went right over. That's because that's an AI piloted machine or aeroplane. Actually, you know, that's an AI machine. It's an artificially intelligent piloted machine plane. Or, if you just want to put it very basically, most aeroplanes in this area are AI machines. I have no doubt about that because they come over me wherever I go at specific times when I know, when I can see that it's because they can't control me some other way. If they don't send, if you're not literally, they surround you, and when they come down on me, like my case, I'm not allowed a moment's peace. I'm not allowed, you know, apart from, yes, I'm making this video now, so they're trying to make out that what I'm saying isn't true. But if I go outside, but as you could see, that plane was going, well, you couldn't see it because I just missed it because I had to get from inside to the door, even though it went right over the roof as I was saying that. That's like the AI machine plane, which is piloted by artificially intelligent android human beings that are part of this military artificially intelligent base area that I live in. You know, the bus depot just down the corner is like almost a major centre of that, because you've got like 1,000 buses with all these bus drivers, which you see how as soon as you get down to the corner, how the bus driver will walk past you. In the past, you never saw a bus driver hardly walking there, even though it was a bus depot. That's because they've, that's just basically because that's part of the patrol system around me. But you notice the difference when you cannot go there one day, doesn't matter what time. The same with houses, when you walk down just a block, or the same with a park. There will always be an army operative, patroller or stalker following you or in your line of sight. So you are never feeling alone or on your own. You never have any peace. You are literally stalked and patrolled 24/7. I've no doubt that when you go to sleep even, they probably use technology in your dream state. Now, I'm not saying there aren't, because I am very controlled by the artificial technology that's around me. In other words, by this artificial matrix around me. Look, I have to use fancy words, but it just simply means that every person around me is part of the army or the military. And they use technology, whether it be with their vehicles, with their buses, with their cars, with their trucks, with their semi-trailers, with their planes, with every person in the area, because they have, conglomerated in this area. It's become a base. It's become a total army military controlling base. And the sole purpose of it is because it is basically controlled by the whole country, which is then controlled by, the powers that be, the most important people that you think would rule the country, who have essentially combined with artificial intelligence and are artificial intelligence, even though they come in human form. You can imagine that if you had, say, the most powerful, the most wealthy people in the world, that they want to keep on living forever. They want to keep going and going. So they use clone bodies and technology and even advanced medical research. Like I say, we've been told that 20 years ago they could clone a human being, but they said, no, we won't do that. Well, of course they have, and they do. They use the clone bodies so that they can go they can put then their mind into a cloned human body. And they can keep going, you see, that way, because if they're the wealthiest, most powerful people and they have science and technology 100% at their, working for them and at their fingertips, because, if you're, yourself, money and power and, means that you have access to everything, and you're controlling science, you're controlling technology, controlling everything, you have everything. And you and your own relatives and your disciples and those that are also, the most powerful people. And when I say powerful, I mean that they, this is a power game. This is a matrix, which means control, which means power. They want power and control over human beings because then they extract the energy from them, you see, because they're life. So even artificial intelligence, because it eventually gets less otherwise, I guess it needs the human life. They use the human being, as has been told to me, like a battery to keep themselves going. And why wouldn't they? Because they've got the control earth, they control the earth. Even if you just said, the most powerful people have got science and technology 100% at their availability, and they want to keep themselves going, and they certainly don't care about lower life human beings, or in other words, human beings that are not in their circle or at their status, or, like their relatives, or that support them. You can use whatever words you like, relatives, disciples, followers, believers, and don't forget most of them do and are in connection with the God entity of this reality, because that's just adding another dimension to it. But it's really real. It just simply means that I've always only thought about Earth, and I've always thought myself most of my life, there's just Earth. Doesn't matter if there's all that space and there might be other planets or this or that out there. Of course, that's all not probably all false, but it doesn't matter. I always thought Earth is the only thing that counts because that's where I live. And even Earth, the whole Earth doesn't even count that much. It's only my local area or where I am actually existing that counts. And this is actually true because I'm in an army-based controlled area. So it doesn't matter to me what's happening in another city, even in my own country, much less around the world. Of course, I realise that it's happening to other people the same as me. And I know that they're of my own kind and that they're real humans, whereas the rest is, artificial intelligence. Artificially intelligent beings come in a clone body, but that clone body is also not a natural male-female human body. It is an androgyne body. This is an essential component because the God entity is, both, is a duality, androgyne, God-like being. And basically came to Earth to suppress and control real life man, woman, creator human beings. That's essentially what I think it is in its basics, or put it, I know there's a lot more to it. That's what I'm saying. It's very hard for me to explain it because I'm not educated or advanced enough to, but the demigods will do that. They will do that. All that's on the computer will do that, and then people will think they're real life. Or even if they say, I'm a psychopathic person telling you about a psychopathic person, which you get that odd one, that professor, etc., that I've watched, where you will still think that person is a benefit to you. You will say, well, if that psychopath is telling me about other psychopaths and has somehow turned over a new leaf, or at least is some benefit and help to me, I'm going to still give that person my attention and my admiration and my respect, and I'm going to listen to them. I'm going to still see them as a support or a benefit, and this is the deception. That's what Lucifer did with Adam and Eve, if you believe in that story. That story may have been twisted around a little bit, but it's still the same principle that's taking place today, where Lucifer or its disciples, in other words, anyone that's around you, whether it be someone that's in power or appears to be an powerful, important human being, or a demigod on the internet. In other words, anyone that's talking and giving you information on the internet, or just getting your attention even, doesn't matter, or if it's someone that you're personally interacting with in your real life. You know, it's still the same principle taking place to where you are being seduced by those people. And I just lost my train of thought there, so... Because when I go back... But all I'm saying is that it's the same old story since the beginning of Earth. Doesn't matter whether you want to say, oh, maybe there was no Adam and Eve. Maybe they weren't called Adam and Eve. But they were natural, normal life. They were spiritual human beings, in other words. I have to use words here to just differentiate the difference between a machine being or a psychopathic type of human being or a real human being that wants to and tries to be happy or wants to be and doesn't want to be controlled and doesn't want to combine with technology or become like a cyborg, in other words, or become like where transhumanism, where you're essentially using clone bodies to keep going. Because some people would say, why wouldn't you use a clone body if you could keep your life going? What is wrong with that? Well, it sounds okay, that's right. But what you don't realise is once you do that, you lose your potential for happiness or for the positive human frequency and vibration. In other words, you do become not a spiritual human being anymore. If you want to put it bluntly, you will become a cyborg, a human being that cannot. You'll become a human being in an artificial body, a duality, neither natural man-woman body that, cannot experience and does not want to experience and actually is against happiness or positive human creative vibration or frequency. You will try to stamp out real life that wants to give out a happy vibe, shall we say, because you are about surviving, going from clone body to clone body or machine to machine, using information, and it's all about intelligence, artificial intelligence. It's about intelligence versus love vibration or love feeling. It's about competitiveness. It's about intelligence. It's about information. It's about using only those things but never wanting to actually have an emotional or feeling positive exchange between two people, in other words. It's anti-love, it's anti-life, but it's survival. It's about your body surviving, it's about you surviving, and it's about making the most of all the earthly delights, as they say. And there's nothing, and that doesn't mean that the earth wasn't here for the delight of a human being. It was. It was only when, as we've told in the original stories, that man and woman decided to partake of the artificial one. In other words, to think that maybe to have knowledge would give them more godlike status. Even though, if you're given dominion over the entire earth and everything, and you have like what they used to call a paradise, you are you're not only close to God, and you're in contact with God at that time. We're in contact with creation and what creates life and what created you. But you've chosen to be deceived by artificial intelligence, by an android seductive duality androgyne being that promises you that you can be number one, the soul god, which was exactly the iniquity of Lucifer against real creation, wasn't it? Because Lucifer was like number two almost, or whatever, but the iniquity was when this being, in other words, the fault came out, the insanity came out, that it became all about not love and not about creation, but about taking over and having power. Because you could be a powerful God, or you could be a loving God, as they say, or you could be a creator God. Love and creation go hand in hand. Technology and destruction go hand in hand. And that's only from the point of view of the difference between being a human being or a spiritual being as opposed to being a technical being, an anti-life being, because they're two separate things and they're two separate types of beings, or whatever word you want to use. See, I have to use all these words because that's what we're told, but also words have to be used to explain something, and that's where the AI is imitating the humans. They're using the words, the same human words, and using the human mind to outwit and outplay the human on the internet. You know, the professors and the experts and those that do all the talk on the internet, because, like I said, when I lost my train of thought before, if you realised that you were surrounded by every person around you was psychic, but your mind had been closed down, you were like trapped, and you felt, and you were limited. You didn't, even if you were psychic, you don't believe in being psychic. You don't think that every thought that comes to you might be telling you the truth about something. Every little time you feel fearful or uncomfortable. You know, like years ago when I used to be very uncomfortable walking down the main street, even though I knew that I assumed that most people didn't care less about me and were living their own life and much more fulfilling than me. I always had that kind of fear or that apprehension or that uncomfortable thing that I didn't like walking past them, or that I was self-conscious. And I thought it was me, my complex. But maybe it was my little instinct telling me that they were watching me, because they were, even back then, even 30 years ago. But I dismissed it and thought that I was psychologically what they call agoraphobic. Yeah, that I was uncomfortable going outside in amongst a reasonable amount of people. But maybe my sixth sense, or my what they call intuition, was telling me that those people on the street were not all real humans just getting about their business. Because you see, I wasn't worried about crowds or people. You only worry about people if you think they're watching or, you know, wishing some sort of ill on you. But if you think everyone is just there doing their own thing, like you are, because I never focused on individual people around. That's right, to me I just sensed their presence. But I did become like that for a period of time, even though I thought it was my fears, my life experience, where I'd always been fairly isolated most of my life. So therefore I got used to it, and therefore I thought, oh, maybe I'm not good enough to interact with other people. Maybe, and also because I had a few idiosyncrasies, shall we say, in other words, things that I had adopted from my parents and things like this, because it's all about really your life experience and your so-called upbringing. That's right. That's why I say the generational curse. That just simply means that everything keeps getting passed down. All the fears and all the isolation and all the antisocial personality keeps getting passed down. And if it gets passed down too much, you can even end up quite psychopathic, in other words, to where you actually dislike. See, it's one thing like myself to be fearful of people, or when I was agoraphobic, or thought it was agoraphobia, to where I was a bit fearful of people because I thought, oh, they might see me as a bit odd. I'll be uncomfortable talking to them because they might see that I'm not quite normal, because I was self-conscious about my own limitations and about my, like I say, idiosyncrasies, my fears. My fear of, in fact, it's strange that my fear of contamination has now become a worldwide virus epidemic, which everyone accepts as perfectly normal, which is interesting that contamination or fears of viruses and germs and things, which I knew was abnormal and was restricting me in my life, which it did. It made me basically antisocial and unable to interact with people, because I thought no one can accept someone that's fearful to touch things and that thinks everything has to be 100% germ-free. Whereas over the last few years we've seen that idea universally, worldwidely accepted, with fear, because it is based on fear, because I was living in 100% fear that way. In fact, not only was I living in fear, but like the virus epidemic, I was thinking about it most of my waking hours. Like I was always conscious of the virus or viruses or germs around me, and always fearful to touch things, and cross-contamination. All this sort of stuff was like just went rampant in my mind, and I was conditioned to that from childhood. But it made me fearful and limited and feeling incompetent, that I couldn't live a normal life. That's why I found the last few years amazing, that it became worldwidely acceptable for this mentality. But that's like when I'm old. Like most of my life, I was ostracised or felt ostracised, felt out of place because of those fears, because they were not regarded as real. That's right, and they aren't real. Once you let fear, even if there is, even though there may be real germs and real virus, once it becomes like myself in my life, a total preoccupation to where you can't live, you probably say, what's the point? Then you've operated, and went into survival mode. You've went into a machine-like mentality, which is what they want. They want you to have the artificial intelligence machine, survival machine mentality, because they are survival machines. They do not want you to live and love or experience any sort of peace or happiness in reality. They want you to only focus on survival. And once you operate that way, you can't live. So maybe, like some people might say, well, I'm still breathing and there's always hope, and sure, that is true. But if the fear is greater than the reality, which it always is, because don't forget, we're in a matrix where they tell you what to fear, just as I was conditioned for a lifetime to fear germs that did me no harm, but stopped me from living, stopped me from day-to-day living normal life, and ended up making me so antisocial and uncomfortable that, yes, although I was correct in realising that most people around were watching me and were different, I thought it was that I was the odd one out, that I was should be uncomfortable, and I felt uncomfortable and almost agoraphobic. Yes, didn't like being in a crowd or out. It wasn't that I was fearful, like some people have said, agoraphobia is a fear of open spaces. No, it's not. It's a fear of other people. But I was correct in that fear in the sense, but it was still a bad thing for me, you see, because it meant that the few human beings that might have been around, I wasn't interacting with them either, so I was not connecting with my own kind. But it was true, the fear that most around were not my kind and were watching me. This is what's now exposed when they come down on you after 60 years of doing it to myself, and now they are openly doing it to me. That was because I woke up. When I started to wake up and realise that as I've said before, that most people around me were psychopathic. I came to that realisation 6 years ago. I didn't realise it was a total controlled military base area. But the minute I realised that, they openly showed that they were a totally controlling military base area, controlled by psychopathic, android, artificially intelligent, machine-like beings that are paranoid about survival. You know, because if you're a survival machine being, you are paranoid about survival. You think that real human beings are there to be used, but you also think that if they wake up, they can expose you as an artificially intelligent being, and therefore real human beings, if they saw this, they may or may not like it. They may or may not accept it. You know, that will depend on whether they, like Lucifer from the beginning, buy into the seduction of that being and say, well, I know you're not the same as me, but hey, there's no reason we can't interact and combine, especially if they play at being a real-life human being. And that's the name of the game, and that's the end-time deception. And that is not only the end-time deception, but it has been the deception against real spiritual human beings, shall we say, right from the beginning of the earth. And nothing has changed except that there is open invasion by technology now with the advent of the computer. It's just a matter of time before mind and computer completely combine. It already has happened. It's happened to me. I know they take my mind. I know they read my thoughts. I know they download my personality onto the demigods or anyone that's on the computer or on the internet or on the YouTube, whatever part of the computer, any screen, any interaction with a mobile, any interaction with anything is all controlled, all part of the artificial matrix reality that we live in. It's just very hard to accept it and believe it. But if you don't believe it and don't accept it, you will be controlled by it, just as I am, even though I'm aware of it. It's like being involved with a psychopath and you're married to them and it's too late and you've got to get out of it. But how do you if you've got children, etc.? That's just a little common example of what happens in the personal relationships. But if you're, a psychopath is no different to an artificially intelligent android being, because it's the same mindset, it's the same survival machine mentality, personality, or attitude, or belief, how they think all the time. They're not about living freely and loving and trying to understand another human being or trying to even cooperate. In fact, because they want to get the negative energy from you, they will oppose you. They will always be, as they say in the videos by the demigods, contrary. Always, like my father used to say, some people just have an opposite complex. And he spoke that because he always had an opposite complex. So he was projecting out onto others because he was also, of that nature or of that kind, a controlling being, psychopathic, narcissistic in nature, cold to any love. In fact, he used to often say over and over again, there is no such thing as love. And he said, even if it does exist, don't waste your time looking for it, because it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. And that was what was ingrained into me all through my childhood, because he used to repeat those sayings. And I used to just think, well, I used to think that's just a bit sad that you married the wrong person and that you have a loveless marriage and that you didn't want children. but you have children, and that you didn't want this, you didn't want that, and you really only wanted to just do your own work and whatever. But of course that was a blind too, because it wasn't an accident that even my own relatives married and produced offspring. The whole family thing was all set up. They needed to have the control. They needed to have the offspring to, as convenient sources of negative energy, because they create a controlled environment, which it's only natural that, if you're a parent, you have control over your children until they grow up. And if they make you defensive and antisocial and limited and faulty, and pass on the generational curses, in other words, their weaknesses, and even project their fears and insecurities onto the children, which is what they do, even when you grow up, you might be limited and incompetent like myself, and only wake up when it's too late, when you're 60 years old. And then the matrix comes down on you to close you down completely the minute you start to wake up to not just your own relatives, because you look back over your life and you analyse everything in detail and say, no wonder I'm now wasted, the 60 years and lived a non-life and never really been fulfilled, and are now in a very unstable situation where I'm surrounded by negative, in a negative neighbourhood, where everyone is combining and using me as a scapegoat to project their animosity and therefore their anger onto me, because they're artificial in nature and they need to extract anger and negative energy from me. So they create an uncomfortable environment for me to live in, and also my awareness that I'm surrounded by this, 100% surrounded by it the minute I go outside my door, so that you feel trapped and stalked and patrolled and controlled, and then you end up creating illness in your own body, because eventually, the old saying, if you've got anger and you can't let it out, because if you let it out, then you're in trouble, then you look like the bad guy. So you have to keep it in and pretend to be calm and nice when you're really raging just like they're raging. But they've got the game on you because they're a raging force. They're a combined community around you. They're everyone that's on the street. They're everyone that's in a car or a vehicle. They're even the planes that go overhead, piloted, because the army controls the Air Force. It's much more controlled than what people think. This is a matrix, which means a matrix is total control. It's just that it gives the appearance of a random natural area or world even. But it isn't. We know it isn't to some extent, but we just don't realise that it's not at all. Not at all.